Hello there, and thank you for joining me. I'm Amy Bishop with WRR 101. This is a bittersweet moment for me because I always love getting the opportunity to interview a very special guest, but I hate the fact that it's an exit interview. Since 2018, Ian Derer has served as the Kern Wildenthal General Director and CEO of the Dallas Opera, credited with taking the company to new heights and successfully steering it through the COVID-19 pandemic. He has accepted the position as General Director of the Canadian Opera Company starting July 1st. So I'm so honored and glad that he was able to take time out of his very busy schedule and join us for a little bit of reflection and chit chat about past and present and future.
Well, I have to say I'm honored too, Amy. We have done a lot of interviews over the years, and you have always been kind of a ubiquitous presence in the Opera House, whether it's at performances or special events. So it is bittersweet, and
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed our partnership and friendship over the years, and it's a fitting way to kind of bookend things. So thank you for
Likewise.
inviting me.
Likewise. Well, how about we start with just talking about your journey in this industry and where it all began and how you worked your way up to being the leader of the Dallas Opera and now the soon to be leader of the Canadian Opera Company.
Well, I literally pretty much grew up in an opera house, and I have my parents to thank and blame for that. They were amateur musicians and singers, and they both really enjoyed singing in choruses. And I grew up outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And there's a opera company there now called Opera Carolina. It was called Charlotte Opera at the time, and they were both choristers in that, and they kept bringing me to rehearsals, I think because it was probably cheaper than childcare at the time. But so I literally was in the corner often at staging rehearsals and performances, and eventually found my way to the stage as some sort of, small child in an opera supernumerary children's chorus. And eventually it I was infected with this love for singing, and I thought I wanted to be a singer. And so I was in the chorus, and I did some small roles as a small boy soprano, and ended up, long story short, from there to a program in the summer in North Carolina where there was a scout from Southern Methodist University, for the high school programs. And I ended up applying to SMU and got a full ride scholarship to come to SMU and study voice. And so that was in the 90s. And 30 years ago, I graduated from SMU and kind of began a series of bouncing back and forth between being a performer and hinting towards administration. So I worked in production. I worked in as a stage manager, an assistant director, director at times, and I was just captivated by the whole art form.
Hmm.
And when I finally decided that it was the administrative side of opera, that I liked opera more as a culmination of all the things instead of just singing or just acting, it really clicked.
Hmm.
And so I got a couple of more degrees and kind of focused my energy towards one city, and I moved to New York, and I lived there for 5 years and ended up being an intern at New York City Opera. And from there, I worked there. This was in the years when Paul Kellogg was the general director, and he was retiring, and there was a transition. And I was there a couple of years as a rehearsal and music coordinator. And that was largely my job was creating the daily schedule.
Hmm.
So you had to work with all the directors and production staff and designers and bring all this planning to fruition on a daily basis. And I really loved that. I've always liked puzzles. I don't like games, but I like puzzles, and this seemed to really fit my personality. And I did that for a number of years, and then got a job offer at the Lyric Opera of Chicago, where
Mm.
I did the same job for a number of years and eventually progressed to director of production. And that was a wonderful company at a wonderful time. I continued to just learn from incredible general
Mm.
directors. I've been very lucky in my life. At Santa Fe Opera, I worked for the founder, John Crosby. In City Opera, it was Paul Kellogg, and at Lyric, it was Bill Mason, and also Anthony Freud, who had just come in as general director before I left. And so I really kind of was on this steady path in administration. When I came to Dallas Opera, the second chapter of my life was to come here as artistic administrator. And I did that 12 years ago in 2014. And that was an opportunity that was just too good to pass up for me. I
Yeah.
had a lot of production background, but I really wanted to kind of exert some new skills, especially as casting and dealing with singers and negotiating contracts and everything. So it was the perfect fit for me 12 years ago. And eventually I took a little hiatus and went to Louisville, Kentucky, where I was general director for the first time in 2016 to 18 before coming back here as general
Mhm.
director. So that was a wonderful third chapter of being in Dallas for me. Yeah.
So, 2 years after coming back, uh, the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and the word, I think, unofficially during 2020 was pivot. Everyone was talking about pivoting, but you did so gracefully. And talk about how you were able to pivot the company into leaning more into a digital presence and also just keeping your audiences engaged.
It was so challenging. And I think the performing arts were particularly affected because you couldn't gather. And that's, you think about the different types of art forms, you think of the visual arts, you think of what makes the performing arts so special. And it's particularly with opera or symphony or ballet, you have a great number of people that have to gather together to make it happen. And that wasn't going to be possible with the COVID pandemic. And add to that, the voice, the act of singing was, we were spreaders, or perceived to be
Right.
spreaders, and so that had its own set of complications. So you had to figure out ways to do what you do in a new way. We were all trying to figure out, just the digital accessibility that we had
Mhm.
with Zoom or any kind of new technology, right? It wasn't new technology, but it was to a lot of us. Um, so embracing all of that and then thinking, what can we do with people that are trapped at home? And all of these wonderful singers were trapped at home. These musicians were trapped at home, unable to gather, and trying to find ways to program or repurpose programs. We had, fortunately, a video library of things that we had done of simulcasts that we could, through relationships that we had with the unions, get permissions to be able to put those back
Great.
up. And it was a real saving grace for us being able to have a digital presence at a time when people really needed something to remind them of the old days of gathering together. So it was a huge challenge for all of us. Opera companies were one of the first ones to just pull the plug, and one of the
Mhm.
last ones to kind of come back because of how long it took to get things in a safe environment.
When was the first time that you guys uh, went back into the Windspear for a performance?
Well, we were one of the first opera companies in the United States to actually have a live performance in their own venue. You'll remember that a lot of companies were doing things outside, and this is, I think, really responsible because of the magnitude of how special the Winspear Opera House is. So we did a gala concert with Joyce DiDonato, and it was with full orchestra. And we had the orchestra pit is so big in the Winspear. There's many configurations, but when you use the largest configuration, you can still socially distance, and by that I mean a radius of whatever it was, 6 feet.
Wow.
Um, Over 55 players. I think we had 56 players in the orchestra. So that's a big pit
Yeah.
that all are socially distanced. And this was pre-vaccine, all of that. And so there was all sorts of screening that had to happen. And Joyce was on stage by herself. We had projections, and the orchestra was in the pit. So it was even the audience, had to be roped off,
Right.
and you had empty seats, 3 or 4 empty seats between people. So it was a bizarre return, but it was a return.
Yeah. What other initiatives and accomplishments during your tenure bring you great pride?
I think there are so many. I mean, getting through the pandemic, I can't be underestimated in what happened with the community and our donors and everything coming to our aid. But there were projects that had to get postponed because of the pandemic, and I think of the world premiere that we did, which was the Diving Bell and the Butterfly, which had been kind of on my desk when I arrived in 2018 as a project to look at, and we went ahead with it, and of course had to postpone it. So being able to then have that particular project, that world premiere, come to fruition a few years later, but it actually happened, and that really was a moment of great pride also because we were nominated, the company was nominated for an International Opera Award for Best World Premiere. So we got to go to Munich and be a part of that whole process. It was very touching, and we got to really see what this does. I mean, this story is a true story, and the people that were affected by it in the book are alive and family,
Mm-hmm.
and to get to meet them and get to experience what that did for them through their eyes was incredible. We also, the initiatives of the Heart Institute for Women Conductors has been something that has been continually evolving and refining over the past decade. It just kind of turned 10 years old. And we were supposed to have a wonderful 10th anniversary concert, but that got shuttered because of the ice storm that we had this past
Oh,
year.
no.
So, that's one of the challenges that we all know and embrace here in Dallas. But the Heart Institute itself was also a recipient of an award for International Opera Awards this past year as well. So those two kind of international recognitions are something that we're very proud of. And they are unique to the Dallas Opera, which I think is always a hallmark. I'm also, in kind of the big picture, just really proud of the level of productions and the artistry that we've been able to achieve. Really stacked performances, whether it's, you look at the cast, but there's the balance that you have with what you do visually and everything else. I'm proud of that.
So I know this is a tough one here. Next question, because I know it's hard to narrow it down. But if you had to pick three or so most memorable experiences, as far as whether it's happy or sad or emotional or poignant or bizarre, or what are some of those moments that you're always going to remember after you leave Dallas?
There's so many. There are so many, and none of which I can really tell on my, in an interview. I have to wait till I'm dead.
Right.
But they're
Your memoir.
my memoir for sure. I remember one day, and this was just a very surreal day, and I happened to be at our rehearsal center, which is in Fair Park. Have you ever been out the
Mm-hmm.
Cariana
Yep.
Center? Yeah. And I think I was talking with Maestro Villaume, and I was outside the front door, and I had the door open, so I had literally 1 foot inside, 1 foot outside. And in my left ear, I could hear, you know, opera going full tilt. There was a huge rehearsal going on, and uh, all this glorious music. And to the right was like these bellowing animals from the state fair. So I mean, here we are. We're uniquely positioned, and in the fall, we are in the backyard of the state fair where we rehearse. So I will never forget that. That's one of those things, and you just think, yeah, that's a Dallas unique
Yeah.
opportunity right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, there are so many wonderful productions I can go back to and remember. The premiere of Diving Bell and the Butterfly, as I mentioned, just really poignant because of the fact that it had been scuttled, and we were trying to find a way to get it to come back after the pandemic. Similarly, with Don Carlo, that was another production that was scheduled to
Hmm.
happen that got canceled because of the pandemic. And then this past March, the final performance this year, I was surprised and delighted by a wonderful acknowledgement by the company and our board chair, Quincy Roberts, at the end of the last performance. And I took my final bow with the company, and I'll always treasure that.
During your time through the years in Dallas, a college student, then coming back as the artistic administrator, now general director, CEO, you have really been able to watch the arts community evolve through the years.
Yeah.
What have been some of the most notable changes?
Well, I think the arts district itself is more vibrant than I certainly thought it was going to be when the pandemic hit, and we were on a great trajectory. There was no question about that. But that really took the wind out of everyone's sails, and we were all wondering how long it would take to come back from that. But the amount of activity that is going on in the arts district, I think, is really grown and increased, and people talk about it much more frequently. So that's exciting. I think that when I arrived, it was maybe 5 or 6 months after Kim Nolte had arrived as the head of the DSO, and Agustin Arteaga was fairly new at the DMA, and there was just an interesting group of people that were here all relatively new at the
Yep.
same time. And it was new energy. And I think that I was a part of something special, and that we were able to kind of really convey our curiosity, our newness, and our openness to new partnerships in a way that was warmly embraced. I'm not going to lie. That was something people were really excited about. But the arts community is something that I think is always part of what we are trying to reach out to. We're trying to find the arts community that will come to the opera for the first time, and who will go to who's going to the Perot. Can we get them to come to
Hmm.
the Dallas Opera? Who's going to the DSO? Can we get them to come to the Dallas Opera? And it was reciprocal for those institutions as well.
Yep. I know you're not going to miss the summers here, going to Canada. You might miss the winters being in
I
Canada,
I think that is going to be true.
but what else are you going to miss about living in North Texas?
I have a lot of friends here, and I have a deep respect for the company. I have a deep respect for my colleagues. I'm going to miss all of them. And I think there's a very unique thing in Dallas when you start looking at the philanthropic community, when you start looking at the generosity of
Yep.
North Texas is it's very, very impressive, and it's something that I know that I'm going to miss. I also, I mean, the food is spectacular. I There's a lot that I'm going to miss about favorite restaurants that I have here, and just some really deep relationships. I will also really miss the Winspear Opera House. It is one of the great opera houses of the world, and the things that one can do within those walls are, they just seem limitless. So that's something I certainly will miss.
Well, opera has become a greater topic of conversation internationally recently due to a viral quote from the actor Timothy Chalamet.
Hmm.
I think you probably heard of that
I have,
before.
I have.
So was that something that was a concern in the opera community, or was it something that was laughed off and dismissed? And what must an opera company do today to make sure that the next generation of audiences remains engaged?
It was such an interesting. On the surface level, I think we're all grateful that opera got the spotlight for a little while,
Right?
and we'll all gladly enjoy the fact that it was the focus of attention of not only his comments but others that just kind of rallied into that. Now, I'm going to be a little contrarian, I think, to some folks and say that what he was saying really helped draw attention to the fact that, yes, opera has full houses. I mean, I think all of the opera houses at one time or another are experiencing great turnouts. And usually those are for either a brand new piece or they're for some really, really well known, tried and true warhorse opera. But for the most part, opera companies need more help. They need more support. We need bigger audiences, and we need audiences that are going to grow and be adventurous and come back to experience new things. So I don't in any way, shape, or form subscribe to it being a dying art form. But what I do believe is that it's not okay as it is. I think it
Mhm.
needs help, and I think that we need to really, truly, as you were saying, find a way to invest and be relevant into everyone's daily life in a way that's going to perk their ears up to go to the opera. And you have to be creative on a daily basis as to what you're going to do to attract new audiences. Um, we have wonderful subscribers and they are loyal and they come back. They may not always like every title in the program, but they're coming back. And we also, though, have to attract newcomers to the opera. And that is a mix of tactics. And that has proven to be very successful with one thing, but then not repeatable with another. And so you have to be on your feet. You have to be very fleet of foot and idea to try to find ways to be relevant with the younger generations. But that is where the energy needs to be.
Yeah, and shout out to your education team and your outreach department too, because you guys really are getting out there in the trenches and doing some really great things for kids programming and things like that.
They're investing in education all around, and I think that that's one of the things that I enjoyed as a child. Now, maybe I was a little more curious or precocious than most, but I also believe that finding that curiosity, opera is rich with it. I mean, whether you're attracted to or curious about language or culture or history or science, you don't think about the science of opera, but there's a great deal of science involved in making the technical aspects of it happen. So, for anybody that's curious or likes complexity, it's a natural art form.
Puzzles, not games,
Very
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is your advice for your successor?
Oh, there's so much. I think the Dallas community is so earnest and sincere, and they have a deep love and appreciation for the arts. And there is a deep love and appreciation for singing in Dallas. And I think that goes all the way back to the early history of Maria Callas being the first, concert of the Dallas Opera performances. And so there are high expectations. So I would say keep your standards high and make sure you're producing at the highest possible levels, because they are a discerning audience and they really
Hmm.
do know. I would say listen, not only to the audience but to the community as a whole. I would also say be brave and think big. I think that is definitely a Texan attitude and a spirit, and I think that's going to serve whomever it is very well.
Yeah, good point. I mean, they call us Big D for a reason,
That's right.
right? Right. So the big picture, what do you hope the legacy of Ian Derer with Dallas Opera is going to be?
Well, I think it's kind of goes back to the artistic level and those stacked performances and casts, for example. Just, we knew that going to the opera was going to be a great experience theatrically and musically. Uh, People may not have all known the titles by heart, or they were going to experiencing something new, but they felt confident that it was going to be of a high quality. Um, I would also want it to be that we are deliberately reaching out to grow new audiences and develop a new generation of opera lovers and goers, and that we're doing that in with fiscal sustainability in mind as well. That is the challenge for all opera companies right now: is not only looking ahead to the future, but being able to pay the bills today. It is a voraciously hungry, cash hungry monster, opera is, and it seems to need more every single year. But we are the art form that brings all the other art forms together, and we bring multitudes of people under one roof to do incredible things for ephemeral moments.
Well, it has been such a pleasure getting to know you over the years and working alongside with you and your team there. You've got a great group of people. And, thanks for your commitment to the art form and your enthusiasm for WRR as well. And I speak for all of us when I say just best of luck in your next big adventure.
Thank you, Amy.